comments from teachers and parents and community members weighing in on things. It just takes some time to get through all that. But
Yeah,
anyway,
and you just don't
right
know.
now,
Go ahead. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I said right now, our metrics in our community for COVID have come way down, which is good.
But see, we're still in the red zone.
You know,
We're
we've come out of
Madison County is still in the red zone. It's come down, but we're still not in a safe zone. The board meets tonight, so I don't know what they'll decide, but I guess we'll know something tonight, and then based on what they do, we'll determine the direction I take with the charter school that I have through Communities in Schools. We're a
right.
small population, but I've met with the principal already yesterday, and we have a plan in place. I told him to go ahead and call the bus. I have 4 bus drivers. I said, go ahead and call the bus drivers, and we've got to go ahead and put things in place, and push the button whenever it's time to start. I said, meet with the teachers and go ahead and get them acclimated to. Well, I mean, we'll be doing the hybrid model. Half of them will be there and half of them won't. But
Right.
yeah. So.
And I don't look for us to go outside the hybrid model for 612. Well, definitely we can't do it until the governor says we can, but our schools are not big. I bet you have some large schools. High school is not even 1,000 students, but we still can't social distance. There's no way.
Right. So
In a couple of our buildings, yeah. I don't look for us to go back.
Scary. I guess you have to try something, but it's still a little bit scary to me. But
It is, and none of our teachers have been vaccinated. None of them.
No, and that concerns me more than anything is that they're so vulnerable to all of this, and I think it's so unfair that they're not. They should have been made a top priority. So
that's right. If it's important to open schools, which I think everybody knows. Everybody wants schools open. I mean, you can't get the economy back on track till we get schools open. I don't think.
Right. I agree.
But if that's what's driving our economy, looks like teachers ought to be pretty up on the list to me. We're still in Henderson County. We have a high population of retirees, so we're nowhere close to even being through the 65-year-old adults.
Yeah.
We're close, so
okay,
we'll see what happens.
Okay, well, Dr. Revis, we only have 19 students with us so far, but we're going to go ahead and get started and, work with the ones that are with us, and I hope the others will join us.
Okay.
Welcome to week 5 of this semester. And I know you hear it every week, but I was just telling my wife, I said, before we signed on, I said, I can't believe, I said, we are 1/3 of the way through tonight. And before you know it, Dr. Revis is going to say, guess what? We're halfway through, and you're going to be there before you know it. But anyway, welcome back, and thank you for doing what we asked you to do and hanging in there with us. We want to talk just for a few minutes about what this evening's going to look like. But Dr. Revis, let's begin, and I'll let you start or I'll allow you to start if you would with task 3, your comments about the work that was turned in this past week.
Okay, well, I had some really good work turned in, and I had some people that were on the right track with a few little minor adjustments. I've had some conferences with a few people and this week, but all in all, I think this was a week that was a lot of research and a lot of writing, and so I know that when you have those kinds of weeks, it's hard to put everything together and pull everything together, but I was pleased with what came in, and we're going to keep refining and working to that polished product. I listened to I've already had one Zoom team turn in their Zoom, and one of their big areas of concern was APA. And guys, don't get all wigged out. Yeah, we're going to tell you to do it correctly, but don't let that be your hurdle. Just learn it and move on. The bottom line is, if it's a glaring error, we've got to tell you about it. But our whole focus is to get the quality of your work to the standard that it's going to just fly right through your evaluator, and there's not going to be any questions asked. So that's why that's why we keep revising and doing that process. And you're a work in progress, and that's okay. Don't get too down on yourself if you don't come out of that first review with 100 and move on. This is the process that we're going through. Um,
I
but
agree.
I that was good. I want to say one thing before I forget it. On your Zoom team meetings, if the Zoom master would take the first 20 seconds of the Zoom meeting and let everybody introduce yourself, because I had to do a guessing game on the one I looked at, and we hadn't told you that, but it's kind of hard for me. I see some of you, and some of you put up, those stationary screenshots, which are always good pictures, but sometimes I don't always remember who you are. And so it just helps us kind of, okay, this is Tasha, and this is uh, Gabrielle, and so on and so forth. So it just helps us if you'll just take 15 seconds and let everybody introduce themselves.
Yeah, thank you for remembering that, Dr. Revis. I will also say that, for the most part, I was very, very pleased with the quality of work that came in for task 3. Um, the work that, in fact, one person I sent back, and I probably was a little bit rough on them, but they said submitted it back today with a revision, and I couldn't have asked it to have been any better. So they did exactly what I asked them to do, and when it came back, it was what I needed to see. So that's the whole purpose of the review process. Um,
Mhm.
I will say that the peer reviews, some of you are just you're knocking it out of the ballpark. The peer reviews are some of the best for many of you that I have ever seen. But then now there's a few of you, and I put it out there. You need to pick up the pace with the reviews. They need to have more depth to them. They need to be more detail, for the author. Um, and we're into the third task now. So I shouldn't have to say that over and over again, you know, to you if you're one of the ones. So I'm asking you to please. We're almost through with the AAPSL, but you've still got another opportunity with task 4, to pick up your game with that. And I'm asking you if we've asked you to go a little bit deeper and to provide more depth to the reviewer or the author, to please take that in stride and to do that. Um, but overall,
Yes,
I've been very pleased with the work. Very pleased.
I think that's a great point. And just to share again, the Zoom team that I listened to this morning, everybody said one of the strengths in helping them become better at what they're doing as far as the task was the peer reviews. So please understand that your colleagues are taking your feedback very seriously, and they're learning from you. So it's not just an exercise ability. Your colleagues are really benefiting when you give that formative, in-depth feedback.
And Dr. Revis, I truly I see them overall as the strongest. It's the strongest feedback that I've ever had with a group, as far as a student being able to take that work and improve their work. And I can see, and I've said this in my comments, your comments, if that person will do what you've asked them to do, they can move um, they can move a proficient piece of work to an accomplished piece of work easily based on your comments, and that is the whole purpose. But the thing is, it lets us know that you, as the reviewer, that you understand what you're doing and that you have grown in this process as well. So I would just say overall, job well done on that.
I agree. I agree.
Um, Before we move on, are there any questions from anybody about task 3 before we move on? We've got a lot to cover tonight. I think everybody is pretty much where they need to be, Dr. Revis. You can reach out to us individually if you need to, before you have to do a final submission this week. I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint that Dr. Revis is going to present, and this is going to lead into some of what you've already done, but it's going to have more relevance to what we're going to be doing in task 4. So that's why I'm going to ask Dr. Revis if she would to share the PowerPoint, and I'll come back to the assignments later on. What is
And Dr. Stebbin, you feel free to jump in as well.
okay?
This PowerPoint is taking the school improvement process and looking at it from a principal's perspective. And so kind of put on your principal hat and think about the process that you've been moving through in your AAPSL tasks and how that would look the same and how it may look a little bit different if you were the principal. So let's move on to the second slide. I like that quote on the second slide because it just shows the importance of the school principal. And a school is usually only as good or bad, as creative or sterile as the person who serves as the head of the school. And I truly believe that. All through your this program, we're going to talk about how that principals sets the tone for the school, whether it be curriculum and instruction, student achievement, whether it be budget and finance, school law. The principal is the person who can make or break a school. And I don't say that just to try to put more weight on your shoulders, but it really is the difference, makes the difference in everything that happens in that school. So the next quote on the
And
third.
Dr. Revis, I wanted to say too, how important is the principal? Again, as Dr. Revis said, you are the principal. We consider you the principal as you are moving forward in this process and as you are moving into the action plan that we're going to talk about tonight. You are the principal of the school. You've identified the problem in the school, and you as the principal, you're going to put a plan in place. And that's how we want you to perceive this presentation tonight.
That is correct. So effective principals have a clear sense of purpose and priorities. And here's the tough piece, guys, able to enlist the support of others. As you've been thrust into the leadership role of leading and facilitating your PLCs and identifying the most pressing need and doing the research and bringing your team to some consensus now, and task 3 is to the direction that you may be going, that's the easy part of school improvement. The difficult part now is enlisting the support of others to buy into the plan. And that's what kind of makes or breaks you as a school leader. How do you mobilize everybody in the school to buy into this plan? And how do you monitor that? How do you provide feedback? If you believe in the plan, you've got to talk about it constantly. I used to tell principals when I was serving as assistant superintendent, when you feel like if you have to talk about how important your priorities are again, and you're sick to your stomach talking about them, that's when people get it. You just have to repeat it over and over and over again. And whenever people bring you issues or problems, turn it back around and somehow bring in your priorities into the discussion. So it's all about eliciting the support of others and mobilizing and putting your plan into action. So on the next slide, we have a couple of resources, and this one's from North Carolina. Let's not even pull that up because it's about a 75-page document, guys, about all the legal requirements and the recommended process to go through school improvement. So that's a good resource and tool for you in North Carolina. And on the next slide, we have South Carolina. And that website is down there at the bottom. I put this graphic in here because I do like the way South Carolina, this is actually comes from their school improvement guide. It is their school improvement cycle. And this is exactly what you've been doing. You've been diagnosing, you've been selecting, you're planning now. And then further on down the cycle would be what you would do in a regular school if they were actually implementing, monitoring, and revising. And that's the cycle of school improvement process that we're continuously in as schools and school leaders. So let's go to the next slide. If you were doing a complete comprehensive needs assessment, which you weren't asked to do here, we only looked at student performance and growth. But if you were doing this in actuality, you would also want to collect and look at some stakeholder perception data, some qualitative data, and some environmental data. Now you will, in further, as you work through the 3 semesters, you will collect stakeholder feedback. You have tasks that will require you to do that, and you will do an organizational and environmental analysis. But for this particular AAPSL, we're focusing only on student performance and growth. And in the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about this. When you start working on your action plan leading into task 4, you're focusing on one priority. The hallmark of a struggling school is they focus on too many priorities. Now, let me say that again. The hallmark of a struggling school is they try to focus on too many priorities. There is no way, if you identify more than 3 to 5 priorities as a school, that you can monitor and support more than 3 to 5 priorities. In fact, I like to see, when I was working with our schools on school improvement plans, I told them, I said, you can't have more than 3 priorities. That's it. And if you have 3 priorities, you've got to have some strategies under each of those. And if you get more than, you're just running yourself ragged. You're not doing anything well. So keeping it focused. We only ask you to identify one priority for your school improvement project in the AAPSL. And that's because, as you see the process that you've gone through, it gets big, and you just can't support it and implement it and monitor it as a school leader. Okay, I think next slide. And these are about SMART goals. You're getting ready to implement some SMART goals as you make your action plan. And of course, you all know about SMART goals. This is old stuff, but we're going to ask you to be specific and measurable and relevant and timely and all those things as you develop your action plan. Now, on the next slide is the actual template that you are going to use in your task 4. And we don't give you any leeway there. Throughout your whole program, you're going to use this template for your action plans, be it looking at student achievement and student growth, or if you're looking at a cultural analysis. This is going to be your template. And we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. Let's see the next slide. The implementation is so important, as I said before, and this is where the rubber meets the road. And this is where I see a lot of schools fall down. That's why I encourage you, don't get too big in your school improvement plans, because you cannot, you can't engage your stakeholders. They're running around trying to just do busy work, because that's all it amounts to. You've got to go deeply into implementing your strategies. And you have to find a way to monitor the fidelity of implementation. I would say, if nothing, all my years in education, one thing that's become very evident to me, if we don't monitor as a school leader, it's your job to monitor. I'm not saying you're the only one monitoring, but you have to establish a process of monitoring the implementation. If you don't do that, don't even fool with anything, because it won't happen.
Well, this is I was told by a great educator one time, a great leader, that what gets monitored gets done.
Exactly. And you've got to talk about it. You know, in every post conference you have with teachers, you talk about, you pull those strategies from your school improvement plan, be it, let's say it's the instructional piece, and you talk about how they implement it in their classroom and what you're seeing when you go in. And again, it's not just you monitoring. You have assistant principals; they need to be monitoring. If you have instructional coaches, they need to be monitoring. But as the principal, you have to monitor it and you have to provide feedback. Now, I'm not saying monitor it in a negative way. I'm talking about monitoring to coach your teachers to get better at their practice and get better at the implementation, and determining support systems. I think just about everybody has some type of instructional support system in your schools now, be they called literacy coaches, instructional coaches, curriculum coaches. Anyway, you have those people who can be part of that support team. And next slide, Dr. Stedman. And then you have to evaluate. As you monitor, when you start monitoring, don't collect assessment data. Get comfortable with the monitoring, get comfortable in your conversations with the coaching. And at some point, you're going to have to collect data. And that data can be formative, how well your teachers are implementing the program or the strategies. And then, of course, your summative data is your student outcomes. And we'll talk more about that as we work through our task 4.
Right. And again, this is key, this formative assessment. This deals with the grown people, not the children. This deals with the grown people as the principal that you'll be working with. And we'll talk about that when we look at our graphic organizer. And it goes back to, again, what gets monitored gets done. This is the fidelity check that we're talking about right here. Okay.
And you know, very effective principals will find a way to quantify or qualify that data that you're collecting as you monitor, and you give feedback, individual feedback and whole school feedback, and it's just very powerful. I think teachers grow. We all know the research is clear that when students are given real strong formative feedback, they can grow in their performance and achievement. I believe the same goes with teachers. When we can give them really timely formative feedback, they will grow. Your teachers want to do what's expected. And I think a lot of times that the roadblocks that some teachers put up, I look at it as being because they are uncomfortable with the expectation. I don't think anybody is going to put up a roadblock just to be contentious. I think they do it because they're insecure, and you have to work through that as you have to coach them through that. And then, of course, we always are revising. We're gathering data and we're revising, and we decide whether we stay the course or modify strategies. But guys, if you're implementing a new program, some of you are identifying some online resources to implement. It takes 3 to 5 years for a program to become embedded in the culture of your school. So, you know, you may tweak it as you move along, but you've got to stay the course. Nothing makes teachers any more unhappy than to get a new program thrown at them every year. They don't have time to implement it and to really get it under their belt and to feel good about it. So anyway, is that the end of it? I can't remember.
That's it, yes.
Yes. So any questions or any comments about that process and the role of the principal in that school improvement process.
Okay, let me pull these. Okay. What I want to do now, Dr. Revis, there's several things. Let me see which one I want to do first. Um, Dr. Revis, I've pulled my helpful hints document to the side because what I want to do is I want us to use that, but I want to actually pull up, um, as you and I are talking about it, I want to pull up uh, the students' work that we did last time, and I want to bring it down to task 4 after I look through this again today. And I think that this will better help them understand what they've got to do as they move into
Oh,
the
I agree. I think models are always helpful.
yeah. Let me pull this up.
And you remember that Dr. Lamb kept saying to you after this semester they don't provide models, and unfortunately that's true. But I promise you, you're going to get so good at this by the end of the
Oh
semester. You're
yeah,
not going to.
and they're getting there already. Many of them are
Yes.
already they're getting there probably more quickly than they realize. Let me come on down. I'm just about there. It'll be worth it though. Okay. You see, you're going to turn in a major document when this is all over with. This is a major document. This is task 4. And this is what you're going to be doing. Now, I'm going to, at the end, Dr. Revis, don't let me forget, I want to go back and I want to show them again what they've got to do to try to make sure that this is an accomplished piece of work when they get through. So don't let me forget that step. You're going to lead the PLC in the research and development of an action plan proposal to present to the administrative team. Now notice, to present to the administrative team. And what you're going to do in narrative form, you're going to lead the PLC in the development of an action plan with a focus on your role as the leader, with references to the degree of collaboration, shared governance, and delegated responsibilities. The action plan is a concise and informative presentation. Again, that word, presentation, that graphically highlights the research, the data analysis, and expected outcomes, and is to be presented to the school's administrative team. Now, before we even begin in it, this is going to be your opportunity to shine, your first opportunity to really shine. You've talked with them about some things, this is what we'd like to do, or what I'd like to do. You've talked to them and you said, this is what it looks like. But now this is where the rubber meets the road, Dr. Revis. This is going to be your opportunity to shine before your administration. And I can promise you this could be very well be the determining point where they begin to look at you differently and they begin to talk about you to superintendent and assistant superintendent about what your next step's going to be. So you need to make sure that you've got your mess together and that you shine when it comes to presenting task 4. Any comments before we move on, Dr. Revis, with what I just said?
No, I agree. This is where it comes together for you guys. Everything that you've been doing this semester, this is the culminating piece of it. And there's a lot of narrative work with it, and a lot of work with putting the plan together and then presenting it to your admin team. But this is the piece where you can shine and show off all your.
Yeah, I agree. Now we're looking at our template, and we're looking at our helpful hints document, and we're going to be referring to that. But this is to me, this is an accomplished piece of work that I'm showing you. Are there rooms for improvement in this? Yes, there's rooms for improvement, but I would still consider it overall to be an accomplished piece of work. You're going to begin, okay, I want you to, this is your heading, the importance of the action plan, and notice this, research-based. It's not what you think, it's not what I think, it's not what Dr. Evans said. This is according to what the research says, unless you happen to find our research when we did our dissertation, and that becomes a part of the research base. But I'm just saying that it's not what you think, it's what the research says. Now, Daryl sent me a question last night, and I responded back to him. And he asked the question. He said, "Am I focusing on, what is an action plan, or what should this action plan look like, based on the work done?" I said, both. That's what you're doing here. You're doing both. In this, your job is to talk about what is an action plan. What does a good action plan look like? What does the research say about what an action plan should look like? You should go back and here. You should go back and you should restate your identified problem again. That's important because your action plan is everything you do is focuses back on that identified problem from task 2. Now I want you to notice what Meredith has done. The most pressing need at her school was determined to be. Now you see what she did? What did she do? In that very first sentence, she went back and she talked about what her problem was. And then from there, notice what we said. You are the leader and you've got to show your leadership. Notice what Meredith did. I led. I did this. I did that with, it's okay. Toot your horn, shine, show your leadership with your PLC. And in here, she is saying, according to the research, based on the research. And everything that you do is talking about what an action plan is, why you need to have an action plan, what's the purpose of an action plan, and then you're going to talk about your action plan as it relates to your identified problem in task 2. Dr. Revis, any comments on that before we move on?
Right. Again, this is where you go to your Bulldog One research engine and, put in importance of an action plan and see what you get back.
I want to come out of here for just a sec. Go ahead and talk. I want to pull up
Yeah.
something that.
Okay. Also, don't forget your text. Your text also has some information on action plans,
Okay.
school improvement plans.
Okay, I want to go to the AAPSL template, and this is I had almost forgotten about this, and when Daryl asked me that question last night, it made me go back and think about this. Go to your AAPSL template and material section. Look under, okay, this wonderful information. Here it is. This is an example of a school-wide literacy action plan. It doesn't matter. It's an action plan. This one just happens to be, the focus happens to be on literacy. And when you open that up, I mean, it is embedded with all kinds of stuff that you can steal and you can use as long as you reference it. You can use anything in there that you want to. Now, Dr. William Willard R. Daggett and Dr. Revis, people are looking at him and he said, well, he's old and he's dated, but his research is some of the best research that you'll ever find. And it is so relevant to even today. Dr. Daggett talks about successful schools from research to action plans. Use this information. And then the Daggett system for effective instruction by Willard Daggett. All of this is there for you to use. It does. I don't care if all 25 of you, cite the same information in this. It's just good. It's just good stuff. So that is there. That is there for you to use. Let me come back out of here. And then let me go back. Okay. Let me go back to here it is. Okay, there I am. I'm always scared I'm going to lose something, Dr. Evans, when I'm doing all this. But anyway,
Oh, I know, but you're doing a marvelous job
oh,
going back and
thank you.
forth.
You make old man feel good. Um, okay, let's go to the next area, alignment with student learning outcomes. Dr. Evans, if you would begin with that one, please.
Okay, so in this section, what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that your student learning outcomes, what you hope to accomplish in terms of student outcomes, um, is aligned to your research. We're not looking for an opinion here. This is again research. So if you look on down on Meredith in her, um, she talked about her most pressing need. She you can't restate that enough, I don't think.
Right.
Um, she talks about some of the strategies that they're going to use and some of the outcomes. So um, you've got to align your strategies with the learning outcomes.
And I just wanted to point out, just this is like, okay, in other words, what are the teachers going to be doing as they work with the students? Teachers will. And that to align with the student learning outcomes of English learner progress, teachers will participate in an extensive level of professional development. This is what they're going to do. You're building your case right now. It's almost like being an attorney. You're building your case. You're building your case um, so that you can present it, and in the end that you can win. And how do you win? The students achieve better student achievement.
And Dr. Stephen, I'd like to underscore that professional development strategy.
Okay, go.
Guys, if anytime you're implementing a new strategy or a new program, your action plan needs to be very specific and detailed when it comes to the professional development. That has to be in your action plan. That is key and critical.
I agree, and I'm going to tell you now, as principals, teachers don't always want to be involved. They say, I've got enough to do. I don't need to do it. You have to make the hard call, and you have to make it happen, and you have to present it in such a way that they want to be a part of it. So, again, that comes back to some of the hard things that you've got to do as an administrator.
And I'm going to get on my soapbox again.
Okay.
As a principal, please remember what I'm saying here. And that is, if you're going to have your teachers attend professional development, you need to be there with them.
Amen.
Not need to be in the back of the room answering your email and on your phone and going through all. You need to be an engaged participant. That message is so powerful to your teachers. If you're there engaging in the learning just like they are, it sends a message that you believe in this, that you believe it's important. And secondly, if not most importantly, you know then how to monitor you. You know what, you've had the training with them. So don't ever have training at your school for teachers if you're not willing to sit through it and engage in that professional learning just like they are.
I agree. And the next thing, you're going to establish or develop short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals and objectives. Each of these need to be clearly delineated in your narrative work. First of all, short-term. These are things that you can a quick turnaround on. And you need to have short-term goals and objectives, because all of us, children especially, but we're, grown people too, we need to be able to experience some type of success pretty quickly. And that motivates us to be able to work harder towards, those things that's going to take a little bit longer. So the short-term objectives are going to be those things that you and your PLC team decide. These are some things that we can go ahead and we can put in place, and we can monitor and get this done pretty quickly, but they will help us get started in this process pretty quickly. And then, you know, those things that you can't do, um, you know, just right off the bat, but it's not going to take, you know, next year to get to them. That would be your midterm goals. You know, along the way, you know, somewhere along the way, what can you accomplish 3 or 4 or 5 months down the road? I'm just using that as an example. And then your long-term goals. Your long-term goals could be, you know, those things that you accomplish by the end of the year, or it could be a 2-year process. You don't, you know, sometimes it has to be. I think sometimes we shortchange ourselves because we try to accomplish too much too fast, and by doing that, we don't completely um, lay out the program and execute it the way it needs to be executed. And that goes back to what Dr. Revis said. You know, what's on the bandwagon right now, and it'll last for 2 years, and before you can really learn it and make it effective, well, the next best thing since sliced bread comes along, and you've got to learn that. So, you know, nothing really ever sometimes gets fully implemented before something else is out there. So as the leader, your job and your goal is to make sure that whatever you start, that you also finish. And that's a hard job, Dr. Revis, sometimes to do. You've got to stay focused as the leader, and you've got to keep everybody else focused that, you know, that this is where we're beginning. But then 2 years down the road, you don't want somebody to say, well, you know, you're one of those leaders that always start something, but you never finish it. You don't want to be one of them. Dr. Revis, any comments on this?
Well, and I know as a leader, we're constantly changing and moving and going and growing. And you may get tired of something, but you have to remember that your teachers need to feel like they have time to embrace the new strategy, the new program, and to get some level of comfort. But more importantly, they need to see the successes. So you have to stay with that focus, and you have to stay with the program. And you've got district leaders maybe saying you need to do this and you need to do that. And sometimes you may have to have that difficult conversation, not an antagonistic conversation, but you need to go to your school leaders and say, look, this is where we are with this initiative, and how can I weave this into the direction and the focus that we're going, because you just can't put more on teachers. You've got to give them time to be comfortable and to become experts at whatever you're implementing.
Right. Now, Meredith only listed one short-term goal, one midterm goal. You don't limit yourself to that. If there's a couple of goals that you need to implement, then by all means, this is the time to do it. Notice what she said. The short-term objective is to strengthen the long-term EL's knowledge of what the access test scores actually mean. All she's doing is going back or saying that we're going to go back and revisit what people may have forgotten, or sometimes we have to just be reminded of things. And that was the short term of things. And then she said for the midterm, the midterm goal and objective is to use this program and text engineering for professional development. It goes back to what Dr. Revis was talking about. They're going to use this program and text in carrying out their professional development. And this program, if you remember, this is the same research-based program that Meredith mentioned in task 3. This is the one that she explored the most in task 3. And then the long-term goal would be to use access test scores in February after test completion to access the student's overall achievement, with the goal that all long-term ELs achieve at least, look what she said, she's put a value there, 0.5 higher point value after continuous use by teachers of text engineering and the QTL model. She put a value there. Every one of you is going to be different for you, based on what you need to do. Dr. Revis, if you'll start off on the next one, please.
Okay, and here's where you list your specific activities with the designated goals and objectives. And I will tell you this, I like to start with the graphic organizer first and then write the narrative. I think it can serve as a good tool to help focus your writing. You don't have to do that, but everything that you put down as a strategy or an activity in your plan, your action plan, this is where you talk about that and talk about how it aligns with the goals and objectives.
Okay,
And see Meredith's aligned that real nicely with whatever she's put in her action plan.
right. Okay. Specific activities. These are things that you're going to do. Okay. And notice in her narrative work, it's okay if there are figures or graphics that you need to embed in your narrative work to help better explain, it's okay to do that. Okay, indicators of success with measurement techniques. Okay, indicators of success will align with the professional development of QTEL in that 100% of the teachers in specified subject areas that currently have long-term ELs will utilize this model and text engineering in their classrooms at least one time per week. She was as specific as she could be there. This is an indicator of success, and there's a measurement with it. 100% of the teachers. Now, how are you going to know this? How are you going to know that it's happening? Now, that goes back, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute, but I'm just going to point it out here. That's your job as an administrator to know that this is happening. Again, it goes back to what we talked about just a few minutes ago. What gets monitored gets what? It gets done. So your job is to know that 100% of the teachers are doing this. And how is that going to happen? It could be through walkthroughs. It could be through you visiting in PLCs and requiring them to being a part of PLCs and monitoring during that time to see that that they bring in documentation of things. There's just all kinds of ways that you can determine that the teachers are doing what they're doing. Now, as a principal, you may not can do it all. You'll have assistant principals that can help you with this, or there may be an instructional coach in your school as well. But you or either your designees will help determine that everybody is doing what they're supposed to do. Now, this is just one indicator. Notice there could be more than one in indicators of success. What are those things that you're going to put in place that's going to determine that what needs to get done is being done, and how are you going to know it? How do you know it's being effective? There's a measurement technique in the monitoring. Dr. Revis, any comments on that?
No, I think you've covered that.
Okay, if you'll pick up on the next one, clarification
And
of
then,
it.
okay, and this is an easy section, but don't overlook it because in your action plan you have to list whose responsibility it is to make sure a certain activity or strategy takes place or gets done the way it's supposed to be. And so this is where you narratively discuss the roles and responsibilities. And we would want to see a broad spectrum of roles and responsibilities. Sometimes it is the teachers, sometimes it's the principal, sometimes it's the instructional coach, sometimes it's all everybody. But you have to list your or talk about your roles and responsibilities. How are we going to make this action plan really work? And who's doing this piece and who's doing that piece, etc.
Dr. Revis, I want you to notice what Meredith finally said at the end. Finally, I will perform at least one planned walkthrough daily.
Right.
So, she was taking ownership of of all of this, and she was proving her leadership in all of this. And I will tell you, many times people, they stigmatize teachers based on, where they teach. Sometimes they shouldn't, but they do, and what happens. The quality of this work came from a physical education teacher. Meredith was a physical education, is a physical education teacher. So she embraced, everything that you would typically say that, well, a language arts teacher should know how to do that, or or a content focused teacher should do that. But she embraced every bit of it in her work, and I'm very proud of her, of what she did. And then finally, the formative and summative assessments. Dr. Revis, I'll talk about formative if you chime in, and then you talk about summative. Formative is for the adults. This is not for the students. Formative is you as the leader of the school, you as the principal, what are you doing to make sure that teachers are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're doing it with fidelity. It's fidelity checks. This goes back to, it could be through your walkthroughs. It could be again, when you have staff development, being in staff development and actually monitoring and knowing, what the teachers are doing, and that they're, participating and learning in that process. Again, formative is not for the students. Formative is only for the adults in the process. And it's your responsibility as the principal and as the leader of the school to ensure that every adult in that school, that they are effectively doing what they're supposed to do. Else, if you don't do that, then there's a gap in the process, and you cannot ensure overall student success and student achievement growth if you're not doing your part to ensure through formative assessments that the adults are doing what they're supposed to do. Dr. Revis, if you'll talk about summative.
And excuse me, and of course, the summative assessment would be your student outcomes, and so there you would determine, and it's you can do it measurable. That's kind of what we expect. If you don't put a number on it, and guys, a lot of times we're hesitant to put a number of improvement on it. But what I have found and what the research bears out is if you'll put a specific goal out there of what type of improvement that you want to see, it's more likely to happen. You have to have a goal. Everybody needs to know what the target is, and it needs to be reasonable, but there needs to be a specific goal out there as to what type of improvement of student outcomes that you want to see.
And that goes back to the EFOS training that you had just a few weeks ago. EFOS lets you know exactly where they are and what they've got to do to make a year's growth, and all of this is tied into that EFOS data that you look at. Again, here is the graphic organizer that Dr. Revis indicated that you will use over and over again in this process. Now, I want you to notice what Meredith has done. These topics are non-negotiable. They need to be in the same order that you see them here when we look at it. She's listed her specific activities. And you cannot have an action plan with just one line of things across here. An action plan has got to, I think hers is, and I'm not saying that you have to have 4 things, but I think that she has reasonably, this does not want to cooperate with, she's reasonably put a plan in place that I think she can implement effectively, Dr. Revis. She hasn't put too much there that it's going to be, it goes back to what you said, where you limit, because if you put too much there, then there's no way you can do it all. But she's listed her specific activities. She said, this is when I'm going to do it and how often I'm going to do it, when it's going to start, when it's going to end. This goes back to what Dr. Revis was talking about. Who's going to do what? This is the what. Who's going to do that what? What are you going to need to get the what done? Now, in here, if it's a program and it's going to require money, then you need to indicate in there, that this program is going to require money, because guess what? When you present this to your administration, you've got to talk about, you need to know something about the cost of that program. You need to know, and you need to say, I tell them why they need to, you feel like it's an investment in the Title I funds for next school year. You need to be able to talk about it and convince the principal that, that this will make a difference based on what you have found in the research. You talk about the research, the work that you've already done back in task 3. Then this, again, the formative assessment, this is what I just said. This is, what are you going to do to monitor the adults? Notice what Meredith has said: evaluations of the meetings by administrators, self-made text engineered document directly related to the unit, walkthroughs, weekly walkthroughs, regular use of actively learn, and monitoring the regular use of it by teachers. But and again, this goes back, who is going to monitor these things? Is it going to be the principal? Is it going to be the literacy coach? Is it going to be an assistant principal? You need to know. And then the summative assessment, as Dr. Revis just talked about, this is the student outcomes, student achievement outcomes. How are you going to know that whatever you're putting in place, how are you going to assess whether it's working or not? Well, what kind of assessment are you going to put in place to determine, to get data to prove whether it is or is not working? And these are your goals. And notice it goes back to what we talked about. She gave 100%, 80%, 50% of teachers, 70% mastery. She's specifically putting up, and don't just grab numbers from the sky. You need to talk with your team and look at, what do you think will really work here? And then finally, indicators of success. How do you know? What do you have in place? How do you know, or how will you know that it's done what you wanted it to do? You've got to put some things in place. Dr. Revis.
One thing that I will say, a given strategy, guys, is professional development. That needs to be one of your strategies or activities.
And specific. It needs to be specific to whatever you're doing, not just staff development. What
Right.
kind of staff development?
That's a given. You don't even have to think about that. Okay.
Okay. Then, now you're getting ready for your presentation to your administration. This is where you're going to shine. This is where you're going to get your administrative job from. This is where it begins. The candidate's going to share the action plan with administration, and schedule a meeting between the PLC and administrative team to discuss possible implementation. Now, it goes back to what we've said already. They may not decide to implement this, but it's your job to sell it in such a way that hopefully they will want to. And if they don't, then you've done your part, but you want to make sure that you want it, again, to be the best thing since sliced bread when you talk to them. The discussion should include, but is not limited to, the following topics. Dr. Revis, if you would talk about building efficacy, please.
Okay, so the first section, excuse me, is about building efficacy. And here's where you would want to, if you look down at her second paragraph, she defines teacher self-efficacy. And again, that's just about a teacher feeling like they have the tools and can implement this strategy and have some kind of power to impact student learning. So you'll need to cite a little research there. And this is about research. This is not just about your ideas of efficacy. You need to define it, and then talk about how we build efficacy amongst our school staff.
And this is just an introduction to efficacy. When you go to the AAPSL in a few weeks, there is a large section on efficacy. This is just an introduction to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then again, you're going to talk about this. You're going to have to talk about this when you present to your administration. So you write it in such a way that you understand it, and you present building efficacy based on, as a leader, it's your job. You have to be a cheerleader for your teachers at all times. And this is allowing administration to be a cheerleader to try to improve how teachers feel about teaching and learning in the school. And then strategies for sustained growth. When what you're looking for, in other words, what does the research say about moving forward in the quest for improving student achievement? Strategies for sustained growth. In other words, whatever you do, you want to make sure that it lasts. It's not just a one-time fix-it-all deal. You're building momentum, and it's you're taking the teachers and students where they are, and you're moving them hopefully to the next level. Now, when they get to the next level, you want to make sure that the strategies that you've put in place, what you're talking about, that they're going to help you to get from point A to point B. But when you get to point B, what have you put in place to make sure that they stay at point B and they don't start going backwards? Because once you get to point B, then your plan should be, okay, we're at point B now. What are we going to do to get from B to C? So you're always looking for strategies that you're going to be able to get from point A to point B. But when you get there, how are you going to be able to maintain the momentum and continue to go forward? Dr. Revis, any comments on that?
Well, again, this is about what the research says, so you'll need to weave that research
Right.
in your narrative.
Right.
And you want me to cover the next little section.
Yes.
This issues concerning diversity, and so, you know, she's looking at one of her subgroups here when she talks about L's. So what I would expect to see here is, okay, well, what about our students with disabilities, or how does that weave into this, or what about our students on free and reduced lunch status, or how about migrant students? You want to talk about how these strategies, even though focus maybe on one subgroup, how it impacts the other groups of children in your building.
And with this, I mean, we've got to be real. You actually could be looking at the social aspects of things. You've got students that sometimes are not always born into with the same opportunities. They don't have the same. So you're constantly looking at the diverse issues as well. In other words, it's not saying that a student that comes from a housing complex cannot do well, because we've had geniuses come from. But the thing is, we know that the odds are against them many times, because the society, there's so many things in society that's against them. That can be a form of diversity, because students that don't have those same kind of issues, they don't have to worry about where the next meal is going to come from at home, and those are things that you can look at as well as you're looking at the socioeconomic status. And this is what Meredith said. One last issue that could hinder growth is socioeconomic status. And, it's okay to talk about that if it is applicable to the student population that you're working with. Um, and then resources. What are you going to, again, this goes back to what are you going to need? You need to talk with your administration about this is what I'm going to need or what we're going to need to be able to do what we're asking you to let us do. And if it's a program, and Meredith had a program in there, the QTL program, she specifically talked about that program. She understood that program. She understood the, the whole premise behind it, and she was able to talk about it in a way that she could say, if we had this program, this is what this program could do for us. Okay, establishing a shared vision of learning, Dr. Revis.
And here's the hard part, I think, and that's what I kind of got on in the PowerPoint about. Here's where your work comes in. That's how do you mobilize your staff to buy in and make a commitment to these strategies? That's the hard part. So I think here she's talked a lot about, that a lot of this information or the PLC came from administrative direction, and that's fine. But you remember, guys, when you're the principal, you don't have that. So, how are you going to establish that shared vision with your staff and get them on board with your strategies? I would go to some research here, actually.
I would too. And I want to show one more thing because it's just, we've got to close in just a minute. And how are you going to prove to us and to your evaluator that you have actually presented to your administration? Well, this is one time. First of all, make sure that you're putting your agendas in there in your appendices as you need to. That you take pictures whenever you can. Okay, this is what Meredith did. Okay. Figure 14 is the PowerPoint presented to Dr. Rosenbach showing the findings of the PLC on EL progress. The PLC team and I examined, and she goes on and talks about it, but she actually put the frames of her presentation to her principal, and she also had a picture of her presenting. If they'll allow you to video it, then you can include that video link in there as well. But just make sure that you do have a good PowerPoint presentation, and that let me stop sharing so that I can.
And I think somewhere toward the end of prompt 2, you need to have just a little paragraph that says, I presented to the administrative team on such and such a day, and reference the slides in your appendix. Or remember, if your principal is on your PLC team, go ahead and put that in there as well. And then maybe you would PowerPoint to your PLC team. But make sure that that is in there so the reviewer doesn't or the evaluator doesn't overlook that piece as well. Guys, this is a lot of writing this week.
It is a lot.
You've got to meet with your PLC team and develop your action plan. Then you've got to do a lot of writing. Then you've got to present to your admin team. And it's just really heavy in the writing this week.
It is.
Meeting with your PLC team.
And again, in closing, we're going to remind you that you know what's due this week. Just remember that your Zoom teams should complete the Zoom team activity for task 1 and 2 of the AAPSL, or anything about the AAPSL you want to talk about. That is due Sunday as well. We're going to be here if you need us. Do you have any questions at this point as you're getting started? Now, we don't expect the presentations to have been completed by Sunday night. We know that that when you submit that work, that it's for us to look at, and the presentations will probably not come until next week. Wouldn't you think so, Dr. Revis?
Yes, and also just to share a little light at the end of the tunnel, once you get past task 4, task 5 is going to be a breeze.
It really is.
It's
You're,
no PLC work. It's just a reflection piece. So
yeah. You'll
hang
get
in there.
actually get to breathe for a few days after that.
Yeah, this is a tough week coming up.
It is. It is a very tough week, and we won't tell you it's not. But this is the culmination of what you've been doing for the last 4 weeks now. This is coming to a head. This is the whole process coming to a head now.
Questions?
You're going to do well. I know you are. I think they're okay, Dr. Revis.
Either they're okay or too overwhelmed to ask a question. I'm not sure.
uh, they're
Guys,
going to do well.
Is the
They've got to
It's
internalize
definitely
it.
matter.
Oh, Lisa said overwhelmed for sure. Lisa, I've seen your work. You're going to be fine.
it is a lot.
It is a lot,
It
a
is.
lot, a lot. That's why we're going to hang up and we're going to go ahead and let you get started. Just
And
let your families know that this is one of those weeks and weekends that somebody else is going to have to pick up and carry the load for you. That you're going to need some help this week. With
And guys, we're not coming online on Thursday night, and that's
right.
purposeful to give you some extra time to do your work. But again, support, you need to reach out to us, okay?
Amanda, I'm glad your husband heard that. I don't know what he said, but anyway, I'm glad he heard it. But anyway, husbands, cook for your wives. Wives, make sure you're extra good to your husbands. Good night, everybody. We're here if
Good
you need
night. Have a good week.
it. Okay, bye-bye.